Now we are going to learn about the Ansible configuration. Certain settings in Ansible are adjustable via a configuration file. The stock configuration should be sufficient for most users, but there may be reasons you would want to change them. The Ansible configuration controls the behavior of Ansible via various configuration elements. The configuration includes some key settings like the local directory paths, where Ansible should look for certain important dependencies, the information about remote users to log into remote machines, settings related to SSH connections like the private key needed to log in to remote machines, and many other settings which control how Ansible should behave. At the time of installation, we saw that it has informed us that the location of the Ansible configuration file is etc/ansible/ansible.cfg. But this configuration file is not the only place where Ansible looks for its configuration. We can place it in multiple places, and Ansible looks for the configuration in a certain order of priority. Changes can be made in the configuration and used in a configuration file which will be processed by Ansible in this order. By default, the Ansible_config environment variable takes the highest priority. We can create an Ansible_config environment variable and store the full path of the configuration file in this environment variable. Next order of priority is ansible.cfg file in the current directory where we are executing the Ansible commands from. Next comes .ansible.cfg in our home directory, so it can be used within the scope of your user account. The last priority is taken up by /etc/ansible/ansible.cfg. And the cool thing is that we can have configuration settings across multiple places, and Ansible will actually merge and prioritize it accordingly. Say if we have a configuration variable called SSH user configured in multiple places, Ansible will use the value from the configuration file located in the highest priority order, say from the file located via the Ansible_config environment path. Then the second priority will be given to a config file located in the local directory where we run the Ansible command from, and so on. Now let's switch to the command prompt and get a better understanding of the Ansible configuration file. Let's move over to the command prompt and view our default configuration file. And here it is. We have the contents of the default Ansible configuration file in front of us. Here in this file as well, the order of priority is mentioned right at the top. Next, we have some default values which are configured in this stock configuration file. In case we want to change any of these settings, we can edit the configuration file and save it. Currently, these values are commented out for our setup. We will not change them right now. But in case we need to change it, we can do so by editing this file in a text editor. Let's quickly review some of the important configuration settings. Inventory. This is the default location of the inventory file, script or directory that Ansible will use to determine what hosts it has available to talk to. Library. This is the default location Ansible looks to find modules. Ansible can look in multiple locations if you feed it a colon-separated path. Similarly, next we have a number of different directories used for different purposes. Here is another setting called sudo_user. This is the default user to sudo to if sudo-user is not specified or sudo_user is not specified in an Ansible playbook. The default is the most logical, which is root. In case the sudo user is a different user, so in such scenarios we can configure our sudo user here. Then the remote port is 22. It is for the SSH connectivity. If we are in an environment where port 22 is disabled for security reasons, then we can edit this configuration here and change the port. Here are some configuration settings related to facts. Facts are pieces of information derived from speaking with your remote systems. An example of this might be the IP address of the remote host, or what the operating system is. Before the playbook starts running, the Ansible playbook gathers all the facts. Facts are nothing but the current values of the target machine, like what is the current OS, the current IP address of the system, and the host name. Those are the facts in the context of Ansible. Facts can also be used to create dynamic groups of hosts that match particular criteria, and Ansible can categorize values from network to hardware resources. So you can imagine collecting all these facts from the network machines may take some time. So typically when we run an Ansible playbook, depending on how many facts it needs to collect, Ansible may take some time to initialize. If you want to speed up the operation, we can either disable the facts or limit or block the facts. Here is another configuration parameter. Here, the host key checking is set to false. So for the first time when we try to connect to any machine through SSH, it will ask for host key verification. You may have experienced it yourselves numerous times. When you use SSH to connect to a new machine, it might ask whether we want to add a host key to the list. This basically means that SSH needs approval from the user whether it can trust the key and the host which it is being connected to. So to ensure that Ansible does not run into these issues and can seamlessly execute the commands, by default Ansible will disable this key check, since the purpose of implementing Ansible is to completely automate everything. Then it makes sense to disable any interactive prompts which need user input. We also have SSH timeout, which for a high latency environment should be increased. Then we have the log path. This is where we go to search for the Ansible log files. We also have something called a vault. So here we have configured the path to the vault file. The configuration vault is used for storing confidential and secure information, for instance, our credentials. If we want to avoid something configured in clear text, then we can use this. It is mostly used for storing passwords. Currently for our demo, we are not changing any value in the configuration file because the default values will work fine in most of the environments. But if we need to modify anything, we can edit this file and make the required configuration changes.